Welcome to Read Your Comics. Today I'm looking at Exo Man of War number 0. This book is part of my exploration of the books of 1993 that were some of the top sellers, anniversary issues, or just things that kind of stand out, at least in my mind, of things that were indicative of that year. I always point to that year as being kind of the peak of the comic market. It was, Turok number 1. It was one of the highest printed books, top of the speculator boom before things started trickling off by 1994. So with that in mind, this book was number 38 in the year of 1993. It sold over 800,000 copies. I remember the comic shop that I went to, he probably ordered 300 or 400 copies of this book. And he sold a bunch. He did make some money off of it, but he also had probably a short box of them left over by the end that he had for years until he closed just a couple of years ago. That said, like I said about Turok number 1, this is a good comic. It is very entertaining. If you were reading Exo Man of War at the time, this isn't really new ground, but it's a good book. It's entertaining with Joe Quesada art. So let's just kind of dive in. Well, let's first look at the chromium cover because, it wouldn't be the 90s without a nice chromium cover. And if I recall correctly, this is the first wraparound chromium cover. Before that, like Bloodshot just had the plate, Turok just had the plate, and this is kind of the peak of, they figured out the chromium, they could make it go all the way around. And they would use this again a few more times in the same year with like Ninjak number 1, and I think Shadow Man 0, and there might have been another one even. And then, of course, other companies got on board too. There'll be a Superman book that I eventually look at that has a chromium cover, and then Marvel got on the chromium cover. Like the Age of Apocalypse books had chromium covers and so on. But this was the first one that had the wraparound cover. And it's a pretty cool Joe Quesada, hero pose of Exo Man of War and his Man of War armor, blowing up something in space. If you're familiar with the book, there's like a whole armada here. If you're familiar with Exo, these are spider aliens. And so that's their ships. Kind of look like spider eggs in a way. So I think Joe Quesada does a really good job in this. He came to comics a little later in his life. I mean, he wasn't like really old, but compared to like a lot of comic artists, they get started in their 20s, and he was probably in his later 20s when he finally like kind of broke out. And not Image, but Valiant brought him on, I think, to kind of catch up with Image. Valiant was already known as like the good story company, and the art was just kind of very static and stale, other than Barry Windsor Smith. You had David Lapham on Harbinger, and I think he did some Magnus, and those are good, but they're very much in that older Gold Key style, the way things were paced and framed and stuff. It wasn't a lot of splash, but at this point, Jim Shooter was gone. The new heads of Valiant were looking over at Image and seeing what was selling over there, and they wanted a little of that too. They were trying to keep their storyline, their tight continuity universe going, but they wanted a little bit of that pizzazz. So Joe Quesada is one of the guys they brought on, along with Bart Sears, who did Turok, to bring some of that. And in this issue, I think he definitely does. It starts out with, we just see some of the spider aliens here. It's hard to tell exactly what they're doing. They seem to be, at the altar of some sort of like tree or something that's growing. They definitely seem to be in like almost like a religious garb. It's just silent. You assume they're probably communicating with each other in their spider language of whatever it is. But again, just good storytelling overall. It's easy to follow what's going on here. Quesada's doing a really good job of that while setting this big scene. This chromium cover makes it hard to keep open. Now they're testing the Exo Man of War armor is what we gather here. They actually have a few different Exo armors. And this Manowar armor, I believe, was like a one of the kind, supposed to be their most powerful. And so they tested on one of their own people here, and it just rips him apart. So they've created this weapon that they are apparently not able to control, at least so far. And that's kind of where it leaves off with them. Cut to 399 AD. The Visigoths, who are, in a battle with they're not actively in a battle, but they're kind of under the thumb and the oppression of the Roman Empire as it's winding down. We meet young Aric, who is the main character of Exo. He's a young boy here. His father, who's apparently a blacksmith, telling him how to, temper the sword of the steel to create a sword. When all of a sudden we have the Romans coming in, they're doing some pretty terrible things right in front of him. That's Aric's mother that they kill. The father jumps in, and you'll see good use of silhouettes here from Quesada too. He'll do this, just a little touch of silhouette down there. I think this is a great page. You've got essentially a 14-panel grid. Aric's father telling his son to get back, and then we get a lot of just reaction of the son watching what's going down. You see just minor bits of the actual fight between his father and the Roman soldier. That blood is enough right there to tell you that something not good happened to his dad. You see a scream, a lifeless body fall down, a sword fall, and then a head. And it's interesting to read these two panels as the head goes flying past, and then he turns to look, almost like in shock. He picks up the sword, and that's a pretty awesome reverse silhouette of him taking out that Roman soldier. So at this point, you see they've killed his mother and his father right in front of him, and now he has revenge on his mind for the Roman Empire. This panel jumps ahead about 20 years, and now he is working with his uncle, and they are pretty much just robbing the Romans for supplies. But Aric always takes out a little bit of extra vengeance on him. And the uncle, he understands it, but he doesn't necessarily approve of it. So you see, like here, for instance, like, again, another great use of silhouette. This time it goes all the way to the bleed. You get the whole town. And that's some of the stuff I think Quesada just does really good throughout all of his books. But considering this was still fairly early in his career, I think this is kind of a standout book for him. Aric and his buddy are kind of discussing, like, oh, your uncle just wants provisions. And he's like, well, there's probably gold in this temple here. We should go in there and we can get gold and then maybe use it for provisions. Inside, you see a priest with, I guess, like a magistrate or something, or governor of the area. And the priest is saying that this girl is a pagan witch and she needs to be killed. And so he's like, okay, I guess if you say so. And he's about to do it. And she says, Lugh, I guess that's how you pronounce that. Lugh. Lugh, save me. When all of a sudden Aric comes up like Conan and just gets him in the back. See the priest, and then again, you just sound effects. This to me is more effective than actually showing all of the violence. I mean, this is pretty violent in itself, and this gets the image across. I find that more fascinating to me than gratuitous violence. Like, I don't have to see every head getting chopped off. So this part is kind of odd. It shows that he is a savage. So he sees the girl. His buddy's like, what are we going to do with her? It's like, we'll just take her back to camp, like, for me. Not that we are freeing her. She's free to go. She's coming with me for me. And they have a discussion here, and this is total male fantasy of, like, I saved the girl, and now he's going to make her be subservient, but she's also willingly being subservient to him. He tells her not to try to escape. She's like, I won't, because you saved my life. And, of course, he takes her. And then we cut to some weeks later, but now they're talking about, like, being married. and she's totally down with it, and she's converting him to her gods. And he's like, hey, the Roman gods are supposedly our gods, but I hate the Romans and anything they do, so sure, your god is now my god. And they're like down, and they're down together. So this part is a little odd, but I think this is establishing something like Aric is not really a good person. And even in the main Exo series, which was probably about 20 issues in at this point, he's a hero, but not like always good, especially when it comes to women. Got a Deathmate ad, more perspective of the time period of what's going on here. It's interesting to note that this Deathmate is kind of like amalgamizing the Image and Valiant universes together. So you have like the Wildcats and Hardcore kind of merged together, doing that well before Marvel and DC would do it a few years later. They're on night. Aric and his buddy are on night patrol. All of a sudden, they see the spider aliens chowing down on their people, and of course, they think they're demons. He goes to attack them. They just start slicing them up with their green blood, and he gets zapped in the head, which knocks him out. And they said, "Such spirit will serve us well in the slave pens," and they drag him off. And his buddies are like, "Oh my gosh, Aric!" as they take him off into their ship. And that's the end of his world here. As we go to 7 years later. Now we've skipped ahead about 20 years and 7 years. So we're seeing about close to 30 years of his life at this point. He's in these slave pens. He's looking still pretty muscular, but like kind of emaciated a little bit, giving him a little bit of the crucifixion vibes there. Totally defiant of the spider aliens, but they still put him to work. That's pretty gruesome, like spitting into his mouth. And this is the part that I find just hilarious. It's very 90s of the time period. So he's going through the slave pits. They're having him do slave work. And all of a sudden he meets this other person who can speak his tongue. And we've heard him mentioned before in the regular series. He goes by Map Giver, but he's Elvis Presley. And I think this is hilarious because at the time you have, tabloid magazines were saying Elvis had been abducted by aliens. Elvis is still alive. Elvis sighting here. Elvis sighting there. So I find this pretty hilarious at the time because they were totally playing into that. He had been abducted by aliens, and he was going to play an important role in Aric's life. So then you kind of just get essentially a montage of these two like having a discussion. I wouldn't say they're bonding per se, but he's telling him all about the layout of the ship that he's figured out, that they have an ultimate weapon. If they can get to that ultimate weapon, they can be free. And there's no way to really figure out how to get there. They don't have any pens or paper, so he takes a bone from one of these dead slaves and inscribes it into his skin on his hand. About this time, one of the other spider aliens comes along and wants to take Aric to be fed on. And you think that's going to be the end. And he's just like, "This is your chance. You do it now." He's like, "I won't forget you, old man." And just at that moment, all of a sudden, they're under attack. And it's Solar, Man of the Atom, is attacking the spider alien fleet. And that's a pretty awesome panel there, I think. And that could have been a big splash page on its own. I think this whole, like with the eye, seeing the fleet, and then just the explosions. And that it doesn't dwell on Solar. You just know that he's attacking the ship, which causes enough of a distraction. There's another cool shot. Enough of a distraction. That spider alien flees and loses his weapon, which Aric catches in the air and kills him with. And then he's off to the races. He's going to follow the map that's inscribed on his hand. Pretty good silent storytelling here once again by Quesada. Okay, so here's where it is. Number 21 is where this is taking place. That was a good cover. And then you do get kind of this like splash page. I feel like this is something like Quesada and the Cuberts were really good at. It's sort of a double page splash, but really you've got this right here, and this page is just bleeding in as almost like background of this page. He essentially gets in there, he finds the ring, which activates the suit, which he calls good skin. And already it's deflecting the laser fire of the spider alien's weapons. And then at this point, he just annihilates them. Him and Solar, who he doesn't realize he's fighting with, they just take out that particular fleet, and he falls back to Earth. And he thinks he's going back to where he left off in his time, but it's now present modern day, and it's the beginning. Kind of a bland Bloodshot ad. Like, what is going on with this trench coat here? It's like floating on him. Anyway. And that's Exo Manowar Zero. This is probably found in a lot of dollar bins. You might see it priced at like maybe $5, but keep looking. You'll find it for cheaper. It's a good comic. Exo Manowar is a good series in general, all the way up into like, oh man, probably like it was one of the longer, steadily good books from Valiant, probably into the 30s or even the 40s. It's still a pretty quality book. Nothing beats those first issues. And this is a better cover than Exo Manowar Zero, or I'm sorry, Exo Manowar number 1, which has a very bland cover of him just like standing in front of a brick wall firing one of these arm cannons. And this is so much more dynamic and eye-catching. If you weren't on the series, I think this would bring you on, and then you would have to go back and get those previous issues. But that's all I got for Exo Manowar Zero. So until next time, read your comics.